Hi, 7th graders. Welcome back. We are on lesson 4.1 on page 190 in your textbook, which is expressing ratios in simplest form and calculating unit rates. So what is a ratio? A ratio is a comparison of two numbers or quantities by division. A ratio is comparing two numbers that have the same units. So very important, I would write this down if you're writing this on your vocab sheet, which would be a good thing to have out. Include that a ratio is the same units. So if orange paint contains 2 drops of yellow paint and 4 drops of red paint, the ratio comparing the yellow paint to the red paint can be written these 3 different ways. So we have 2 drops of yellow to 4 drops of red. We would say 2 to 4. This would also be read as 2 drops of yellow to 4 drops of red. Instead of writing the 2, we just write the colon. Or we can write it as a fraction, 2/4, or we would say 2 out of 4. So 2 drops of yellow out of 4 drops of red. So 3 different ways that you can write ratios. Okay, so how do we write ratios and how do we write them in simplest form? So if we're given this ratio, 3 nonfiction books out of 12 books, even though these are nonfiction books, it's still the same unit. We're still talking about books. So we would write this as, we would write this as 3 books over 12 books. Now remember, I could write it as 3 to 12, but because we want to write it in simplest form, the easiest way is to write it as a fraction. So we have 3 books out of 12 books. So 3 out of 12 are nonfiction, which I know you've heard millions of times as statistics, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 4, or whatever. Okay, so if I, for a second, just cancel my books, I have 3/12, and then we know that we can simplify 3/12. They can both be divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So then we can say 1 out of 4 books is nonfiction, or 1/4. So we would say 1/4 or 1 out of 4. If I take my 3 nonfiction books and there's 1 shark book, I would write it as 1 out of 3. 1 book out of 3 nonfiction books is a shark book. And that's my simplest form. So like over here, we got it to simplest form as 1/4. This just stays as 1/3 because it's simplest form. We could also write it as 1 to 3. What about shark books to all books? Well, I have 1 shark book, and then all books would be 12, so I would write it as 1/12, and that would tell me that means 1 shark book, or 1 book out of all my 12 books is a shark book. Okay, if we have 20 minutes of exercise to 1 hour of studying. So I have 20 minutes and I have 1 hour. Remember, my ratio has to be in the same units. So I am going to write this as 20 minutes. I'm on my computer at home, so that's why it's a little bit slow. And then I'm going to convert my 1 hour to minutes. So I know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So I have 20 minutes out of 60 minutes, and then I can, for a second, just forget about my minutes. And I know that that they can both be divided by 20, so 20 divided by 20 is 1, 60 divided by 20 is 3. So this tells me that I have 1 minute, I'm doing 1 minute of exercising to 3 minutes of studying, or 1/3. Okay, and we could also write it as 1 to 3. So pause for a second and see if you can do A and B in your notes. So we have 16 pepperoni pizzas out of 24 pizzas. Pizza is my unit, so I can write it as 16 over 24. I know that 16 and 24 can both be divided by 8. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So 2/3 of the pizzas are pepperoni. Or 2 pepperoni pizzas out of 3 regular pizzas. So if you take 3 pizzas, 2 of them will be pepperoni pizzas. 8 ounces of butter to 1 pound of flour. So here we have different units, so I have to convert. So I have 8 ounces, but I know that there's 16 ounces in a pound, so I'm going to write it as 8 ounces over 16 ounces. 8 sixteenths. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. So our ratio in simplest form would be 1/2. Now if we're talking about rates, a rate is a ratio, but it's comparing two different things with different types of units. So a rate, for example, would be, let's get a different color, $5 for 2 pounds, or 130 miles in 2 hours. See how it's comparing how much it is for how many pounds, or how many miles you're traveling in a certain amount of time. So when a rate is simplified so it has a denominator of 1, it's called a unit rate. Or a unit rate is how much, for instance, how much money it would be for 1 pound. Or how many miles you would travel in 1 hour. So unit rate, it's important to know it's whatever it is for one thing. So if Lloyd worked one Saturday for 6 hours and earned $40, what was his average rate of pay in dollars per hour? So we could write this as a ratio, but now we're comparing two different types of units. So I could write it as $40 for 6 hours. And it's important to write your units for when you're simplifying, then you know which goes with what. So if I know that he makes $40 in 6 hours, I want to figure out how much does he make per hour. So that would be my unit rate. My unit rate would be how much he's making per hour. So the way that we would do this is that we want to get it so our denominator is 1. So this would be 1 hour. So I know 6 divided by 6 equals 1. So I would do $40 divided by 6. And if I do $40 divided by 6, I get approximately $6.67. Okay, so we can leave it like that, or we can write it, which is a little bit more appropriate and makes a little bit more sense. We can write $6.67. We can either write it out per hour, yep, that's supposed to say hour, or I can write it like 667 per, my dash would be per hour. Super important to label, so make sure you get in the habit of labeling my money and my rate. So my unit rate then is hour, and it's telling me that he makes $6.67 per hour. Okay? So remember, what we have to do whatever we can to get our denominator to 1. So let's do one more together, and then you can do the next one on your own. So if I have 24 tickets for 8 rides, I would write it out as 24 tickets over 8 rides. Okay, so to get to 1 on the bottom, I have to go 8 divided by 8 equals 1, so 24 divided by 8 equals 3. 3 over 1 is the same as 3. So it would be 3, I'm running out of room, tickets per ride. RD abbreviated for ride. Okay, so if it's 24 tickets for 8 rides, then it's 3 tickets for 1 ride. Okay, pause me and do 4 inches of rain in 5 hours. So if I have 4 inches over 5 hours, I know to get to 1, I have to go 5 divided by 5, so I have to do 4 divided by 5, and I get 0.8. So basically what you're doing is you're taking your numerator and dividing it by your denominator. So then we have 0.8 inches for 1 hour. So I would write this as 0.8 inches per hour. Again, get used to writing to labeling correctly. Okay, feel free to look back at the chapter or at the lesson on page 190 and page 191. Otherwise, make sure you go on to NICU and take the 4-1 quiz, and have an awesome night, and I'll see you tomorrow.